Welcome back to the podcast. And if you're listening in real time, happy holidays. It is a special time of year, isn't it? With the holidays, with the wrapping up of the year, reflecting on the past year. I hope you are able to spend some time with your loved ones, take some time off and rest, and take some time to really reflect on this past year and celebrate yourself, no matter what happened, to really take in what it is you've learned from this year, the lessons that you're going to bring into next year, and to celebrate yourself for being in the arena. Right? As an entrepreneur, you are in the arena, and sometimes it's going to go amazing. Sometimes it's not. But guess what? When it's not, we learn the most. So there's still something to take in. And I want you to just acknowledge yourself for a moment for everything that you've overcome this year, everything that you went through, everything that you stepped into, and everything that you have become. If you didn't listen to my episode, just a episode or two back about my favorite end of year ritual, I highly recommend listening to that one after this episode, because in that episode, you can actually grab my end of year journal, which is all about reflecting on the year and setting yourself up for what's next. All right. So for today, I thought I would dive into my 5 biggest lessons that I learned this year. And like I said, I tend to be reflective at this time, but I'm also ultra reflective because not only am I wrapping up in terms of like the calendar year, but I'm also wrapping up a year around the sun. My birthday is the day after Christmas on December 26th. So I am always in deep reflection, just thinking back to this year of my life and what I took in and what I learned. And so I wanted to share some of my biggest lessons kind of around business specifically this year, since after all, this is money manifestation and business. I wanted to share my top 5 business lessons of the year in hopes that maybe you can take them too. Maybe you've learned some of the same lessons this year, or maybe it'll be something that you can learn from without actually having to go through the lesson and take it into your new year. All right. So without further ado, let's dive into them. The first one is a biggie, and it's all about the importance of receiving support as an entrepreneur. That was just such a big lesson for me this year, as I have been fully supported in a way that I don't think I had been as much previously, and it really made all the difference. I have to say, I feel so different today than I did 1 year ago, and it is thanks to the support that I allowed myself to receive. And every year I pick a word of the year. And it's a word that I kind of let come to me in terms of what do I need next? What is this year about? What's my focus of the year? And I kind of let the word of the year reveal itself. I tend to meditate on it around this time, right? For next year, I'm kind of meditating on what's next. But this past year, my word of the year that came to me so strongly was support. And it was support on many levels. It was support around my team and really growing that. I realized that my business was growing and there was a bottleneck. It was growing, but only to a certain extent. And I had realized that it was because the support that we had and what we were doing within my business and my team, we just didn't have enough time to get to everything that we wanted to get to. Right. And, so I knew it was time to expand that. It felt very scary, don't get me wrong, but I just knew it. And that's why I looked at it as not necessarily just growing my team, but it's like growing the support, right? Because I really believe in the law of giving and receiving. And I believe that we can only give to the extent that we're also willing to receive. So this was really a year of me expanding my capacity to receive support and let go of the idea that just because I can, it doesn't mean that I should, right? I told myself that thought often: just because I can, it doesn't mean that I should. And I really spent this year thinking about what is my zone of genius? What lights me up? What am I super good at in my business? And what do I suck at? What do I hate doing? What hurts my brain, right? And when I was hiring, I really thought about hiring someone who was really good and loved all the things that I hated. I really thought about, I want someone who has a very different brain from mine. And that was the lens that I looked through as I was hiring out support. And it has been such a game changer. Like, when I tell you the back end of my business is completely different this year than it was last year, like, it's organized. We have SOPs in place. I have data like I've never had before. I truly feel like I've been able to step into the visionary role of my business. And I now have an integrator, a team of integrators that are absolutely fabulous and amazing. And this was stretchy for me to invest in this level of support. But as you all know, courage is the key to manifesting. And I just trusted. I stepped into courageous action. I thought it through thoroughly. I didn't just make a rash decision. It made sense to do it. And I went for it. And so I have received more support, and I feel better in terms of what I'm doing in my business than I had in the past. So that was a huge lesson for me. But when I say support, it's not just in that area. That was one channel, that was one area. It was also around receiving my own personal support, right? And hiring my own one-on-one coach. So I hired a new one-on-one coach this year that has been supporting me, and that's been amazing. I hired a therapist, and I worked with a therapist for a few months to work through some personal stuff that was coming up. So my question for you is, how can you expand your capacity for receiving this year? And what kind of impact do you think that's going to make on your life and on your business? All right. So number 2, this lesson's a toughie, but it came up for me quite a bit. When things feel like they're falling apart, sometimes they are, and that doesn't mean it's a bad thing. Felt like things were falling apart quite a few times throughout this year, and they did fall apart in different ways, right? In fact, I recorded a podcast episode on this earlier this year as I was going through it, because it felt like old ways that were working were breaking down. Things that I was creating weren't working from time to time. And I felt like oftentimes, it just felt like things that were just falling apart. That it's the only way to describe it. But here is what I have seen time and time again after I've gone through this in many different ways this year, is that oftentimes they're falling apart so that they can be in a way that's even stronger. Or it's almost like a clearing, right? It's like they're falling apart so that something even better could come in that you had no idea about. So what's really great in the lesson I'm actually embodying around this is that when it feels like things are shattering or falling apart or not going according to your ego's plan or your goals, to trust the universe, to really trust that the universe has got your back. And that was what I leaned into time and time again, was trusting that things are going to work themselves out, and in a way that's even better than I can even imagine. And the feeling that I leaned into was trust and surrender, and really trusting in something higher, and knowing that even though things seem like they're not going well and it feels permanent, to practice the thought, this is not permanent, that this is happening for me in some way, and it's going to reveal itself, but I'm not sure how it's working out for now. And that was really the lesson all throughout this year that I'm really taking into next year, because guess what? It's going to happen throughout our human experience. It's going to feel like things are falling apart. Sometimes they will be falling apart, but that is so that we can evolve and grow into what's next. That is always even better. It's always even better. In fact, those times that are the hardest of our lives, oftentimes at the end, like you go through that tunnel and it's brighter than you could have ever imagined. So, I mean, we live in a world of contrast after all. So, if it gets dark, it's also going to get light again. It is absolutely inevitable. All right. Lesson number 3 was how wonderful and important it is to have hobbies outside of business. And that is something that I stepped into this year was prioritizing things in my life outside of business. I would say the past couple of years up until this year, my life was kind of business and then Josh and my family, right? Like there were pieces of my life, of course, but it was very much mostly business and then weekends off with Josh, having fun, right? We would travel here and there and everything. This year, I really stepped into the idea of prioritizing all of it. Like business is just one channel of my life that lights me up. It's just one of my hobbies and joys and creative projects, right? That is just one of many. And I did all kinds of new things this year. I went and joined a canoe club in Maui. So I got to do outrigger canoeing. I went to Maui more than I've ever been before and really just took advantage of any time my condo wasn't booked going there. And that felt kind of stretchy at times, but I was like, it just lights me up. I love it there. And I just expanded my capacity for doing it and for going for it and really for being in that beautiful energy. I spent more time with friends than I have in the past, right? I had friends who came and visited. I would take more walks and just enjoy my time with friends and really decided this year I want to strengthen my friendships, right? And spend a little bit more time with friends than I had in the past. So I just focused on all the areas outside of business that light me up. And I have to say, it makes business so much more enjoyable and you get to be so much more creative when you're not thinking about it all the time. So that was a big lesson for me this year and something that I am absolutely going to continue on with. So for you, if you have been all consumed by business for the past couple years or this past year, I want you to consider what is something you've been thinking about doing, but maybe putting off. And just start small, right? Just start by booking one thing, right? Book one painting class or take a dance lesson or do something just for the joy of doing it. Another thing that I usually like to think about in terms of hobbies is like, what does my inner child like to do? What is the younger version of Jamie? What did I love to do? And how can I bring more of that playful, young energy and young spirit into my life now? It's very youthful, it's very joyful and fun. And so that is what I would definitely encourage you to do in the new year is to find some hobbies, have some fun, bring fun and play into your life. It makes all the difference. And I think a lot of us think, oh, it's going to be at the expense of my business. If I do that, my business is going to tank or it's going to go down or I need to focus on business all the time to be successful. And I want to encourage you to question that and consider what if the opposite is true, right? What if the more full I feel in life, the more it's going to fuel my business, right? Of course, we're going to still prioritize our business and put time into it. But what if that's only one channel of your life, one piece, one aspect of your life, and that it gets to be really full and that you deserve that, right? We live one life. Let's fill it up. Okay. Lesson number 4. This one was a fun one that revealed itself, and it was all about finding out more of the things that I love to do in business. And one of the things is hosting retreats. I did 2 retreats this year, and I loved them. They were both so special. I had the most incredible clients come in and attended these retreats. It was transformational. It was so much fun. There was so much connection. And I just found a joy in it. I found that it is part of my zone of genius, and I really, really enjoyed it. So that was really fun to kind of learn about myself. And I wouldn't have learned that if I didn't take courageous action and just take the leap and decide to host it. Because I remember like I had this experience where I was like, I'm not ready. I don't think I'm ready for a retreat. It's going to be hard to enroll. And I remember thinking, Jamie, you just go, take the leap. You want to do this? Just go for it. What's the worst that could happen? And I kind of went through this phase last year. I remember where I was just asking myself, like, what have I been waiting on? And just doing those things and taking action on them. And I have to say, you will learn so much about yourself by doing that, because I absolutely loved the experience of having those retreats. And I am definitely soaking those in as like two of my favorite experiences of this year. So, my question for you is, what are you waiting on? What are you waiting on in business? What's something you'd like to try out and just go for without attachment to it having to be perfect, right? What do you want to just like go for, experience, try? What does your soul want to give, to offer? Go for it. All right. The fifth one, my fifth biggest lesson of this year was all about following the energy. And what I mean by that is, another word for this is follow my intuition. Really tune in to, what do I really want? What feels right? That's a question that I consistently ask myself. What feels right? What feels the most intuitive? Even if it's not the most logical, even if it's not, what is most habitual, what feels right? And to follow it and trust it. And I have to say, I learned this lesson in many different ways. One was by not following my energy and things kind of falling apart because I wasn't really following my energy. Right. And I look back in hindsight and I realized, like, oh, I wasn't trusting my really inner self there because I was scared, or I felt like I had to do something. And things usually don't pan out very well whenever you're going against your instinct or your intuition. And they didn't. So I learned that lesson. And I also remember, just pausing more and really asking myself, what feels right? What do I really want? Not what I have to do, not what is fear driving me to do, but what do I really want here? Right. And listening to my body. So I remember even a specific experience where I did this, and it was amazing. It led to an incredible summer. Let's just put it that way. So I had a meeting with my OBM/COO. We have meetings like every other week. And we were talking about our plans for the summer. And my plan was just to launch again, because up until that point, I just kind of launched quarterly. It was just what I did. And I felt like I have to launch in order to create the results that I want to create and all that kind of stuff, right? We get into patterns, we get into habits. And I was just in the habit of launching all the time, but I was a bit burnt out, right? Because I had done several launches. And then on top of it, I had hosted a retreat. And just there were many things that I did in the business. And I was really just at that point where you can kind of feel I'm on the cusp of burning out. Like, I'm pretty tired, and I was processing some stuff. And I remember her saying, well, what if we didn't launch this summer? Like, what if we took a break from launching, took care of some back end stuff, right? Did some things that maybe we've been putting off. And what if we just didn't launch? And at first, I was so resistant. I was like, wait, what? No, we have to launch, blah, 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 right? And I'm so glad I didn't just initially listen to that chattery brain. I realized, wait, I need to pause on this. And there was a part of me that said, Jamie, sleep on it. So I remember telling my OBM, you know what? Actually, let me just sleep on it, and I will let you know what the plans are for this summer, tomorrow or the next day. I said, I'm going to sleep on it. I want to sit and meditate on it. And I went to yoga that evening, and I remember, like, okay, I just want to ask my body, what do I want? Does it make sense to launch this summer? Does it make sense to break? What do I really want? And I remember just slowing down and I just put the question out there. I didn't ruminate on it. I didn't think about it. I didn't try to solve it from my head, but I just started doing the yoga class and I just remember my body told me, pause. You are meant to have a slow summer. You're meant to have a joyful summer. You're meant to soak up the summer, right? You can just still give value and add things, but let's not launch. Let's pause. Like I just kept hearing that question, pause. And that did feel scary. It's not like what my mind wanted to hear because it wasn't the habit. But I really knew based upon other experiences that had previously happened that it is important to listen to my body. It is important to listen to the energy. It's important to listen to my intuition and to trust it. And so I courageously decided to listen to it. And I'm so grateful that I did because this summer I was really able to kind of recalibrate, to take some time off. I remember in the afternoons, I would go out and read books in the pool, which is something I never done. Like I never use my pool. And this is our last year living in this house in LA. And I thought, you know what? I'm going to use this darn pool that we have been paying for all of these years and taking care of all of these years. Let's use it and let's really receive it. So that was what I did. And I'm so glad that I trusted it and learned that I was totally safe. And then by the time it was time to launch again in the fall, it felt really lit up and I was excited and creative and ready and I had the energy back. So the lesson there is follow the energy, follow my instinct, slow down with decision making, slow down, ask my body, go to yoga. For me, it's helpful. And not to try to solve everything from my brain all the time. Makes a huge difference in business. So, those are my top 5 biggest lessons this year in business. And I would love to pose the question to you. What are your 5 biggest lessons in business? If you have not downloaded my workbook, my end of year workbook, where you can kind of reflect on these things and reflect on these questions, I highly recommend downloading it. In fact, I'll put it in the show notes of this. And if you want to learn more about it, go back a couple episodes where I talk about it because I think this will be really useful before you kick off the new year. And if you're not listening to this in real time, think about this at any point, right? We can do this quarterly. We can do this mid-year. There is no wrong time to reflect back and think about the lessons that we're learning and what we want to take into what's next. All right, my loves. Well, I hope you have an amazing rest of the year. I want to say I so appreciate you being here and listening. I love being able to offer this podcast, and I wouldn't be able to without listeners. So, thank you so much for being here this year. I have so much gratitude for you, and I'm sending you lots of love. Happy manifesting.